Welcome to the Spirit Room. This podcast is a gathering place for people in search of personal growth and life's higher meaning. I'm your host, Mike Consul. I also invite you to spend time on the Spirit Room website, where you'll find headlines about religion, spirituality, psychology, and the New Age movement. Just go to thespiritroom.org. I've spent my whole life trying to solve other people's problems. I've known this about myself for a long time, but it was about 2 weeks ago I was talking to my brother and realized it all over again, because there is a young man who's close in my life, who's going through some issues, and there I was again, as usual, trying to solve his problems with all kinds of suggestions, and why don't you do this, and why don't you try that, and you have to stop doing this, and you have to stop doing that. And I said to my brother, I've done this my whole life. I'm always trying to solve people's problems. I'm always trying to give thoughtful advice and get them past whatever stumbling block they've got in their life. And he started to laugh, and he says, I know you do. And I told him, I said, I do it with you too, don't I? And he said, yes. And my brother owns a couple of restaurants, and he'll talk about personnel problems, he'll talk about challenges with hiring, talk about marketing, all things that I feel like I've got some very rational and well-informed opinions about, and I'll go ahead and try to tell him these things. And, why do I do that? I said to him, of all the times I've given people advice in my life, I could count on one hand when they have actually taken the advice and it has worked out for them in some manner. It's really kind of a waste of time. People have their own paths in life to walk. That's what I was telling my brother, that they can't get this kind of information from the outside. It's not as though I'm assuming that what I'm telling them is full of wisdom. I do consider myself an informed person. I do stay very current on the latest thinking, and I'm a very rational and common sense thinker. And it's amazing how many people oftentimes are simply overlooking something that's obvious to them. And I know that I'm not the only person who does that. It's a guy thing, is what many women will tell you, and I see it with men too. It's maybe it is one of those guy things. We like to fix things. We like to solve the problem. I think I take it to the nth degree because I probably do it more than most guys. I'm willing to get involved in people's lives to the degree that I'm trying to help them through discussion, through intellectual exchange. Not necessarily, it's not like I'm handing out money or I'm saying just hand the problem over to me, I'll take care of it, or what have you. But bottom line is we all have our own path to walk in life, and that path needs to be walked regardless of whether somebody's got some good advice for us. We learn by experience. Almost everybody learns by experience, it seems. They don't take the lessons of other people. It's true that a lot of problems or mistakes can be avoided by simply talking to people who have already done what you're planning to do or lived the life that you haven't lived yet. But still, we need to go through the paces, or so it seems. So I discussed this with my wife, and she agreed that I'm one of those people who is always trying to solve a problem. So the most recent example being this young man who I certainly could be of use to. He's quite inexperienced by comparison. I've done a lot more living than he's done, but the big issue was trying to keep him focused, trying to get him to keep what he was trying to do simple and to stay focused, and he's extremely bad at that. He's one of these guys who've got ADHD. He's extremely short on attention span. He's hyper, tremendous difficulty sitting still, tremendous difficulty letting a person finish a sentence without busting in. Something that I can relate to because I've done quite a bit of that in my life as well. I'm impatient. I think I've got a touch of ADD. But when it comes to getting a project done or solving a problem, I'm actually quite good about staying focused and organizing it in a manner that allows me to get it done. So, as I said, I think there's lots and lots of listeners out there who do the same thing that I do, which is one of the reasons I thought this would be a good topic of discussion. Not so much discussion, I guess. This is a monologue. So podcasts are usually monologues. Why do we do this? Why do we try to help other people? Well, we're trying to be helpful, but when you stop and think about it, how often are we really helpful by giving even very prudent advice? Then there's the opposite problem. There's the issue of wanting to give advice, giving advice, and then being concerned that, good God, what if the person actually takes the advice and it turns out disastrous? Because there are times when there's a lot at stake. It might be a relationship. It might be a job where if there are some missteps, they could end up losing their job. You know, in cases like that, I normally will say, you know your boss, you know your management team, you know your situation. There's so many nuances to this that I couldn't possibly know. So you have to be cautious. Don't be rash. And consult your stomach. I say that a lot to people. Consult your stomach. What does your stomach tell you? What's your stomach comfortable with versus what is it that makes your stomach queasy? If something's making you queasy in the stomach, it's probably not the right path to go. I tell people that a lot when they're trying to make a decision between two different things. They're not sure which way to go, which job opportunity to take, whether to stay with a relationship or leave a relationship, or other things that have much lower stakes than that. But what I've learned over the years is, boy, if you don't trust your instincts are almost always correct. Your stomach is where a person's instincts usually, almost always, will express themselves. So if it's not comfortable in the gut, if viscerally you are feeling that it's a bad decision, it's almost certainly a bad decision. Now, I'm not talking about something such as taking a new job and then what happens is you're feeling very nervous before you get started. Well, that's normal. But it's just the actual act of making a decision. We agonize over things at times. So what I do, and people like me do, can sometimes be seen as being a busybody, sticking my nose into a place that it doesn't belong. And so often, a person will be telling me something, and they're not asking for my help. I simply offer it. I'm being officious. There's a word in the English language that is the word being officious, meaning that basically stepping forward and getting involved in a situation, offering advice or assistance where none is requested. People want to talk about their situation because it helps clarify in their own minds their situation. It helps them sort things out. It's also a stress reliever in some cases. This is why we articulate. Oftentimes why we articulate. I mean, haven't you, for guys, the guys out there, you're with a woman, she comes home from work, she wants to tell you about her day, she's complaining about something, and you try to offer some sort of advice or you try to have an interchange, and she just will put a hand up or interrupt and say, just listen to me. And that's what people want a lot of the time, is just listen to me. I don't want your advice. I want somebody to be a sounding board and simply hear what I'm saying. I couldn't say it at work, but I got to get it off my chest. Can't you just listen and not try to solve my problem? In some cases, maybe there is no solving the problem, or nothing you say is going to be meaningful to me for this reason. I either have known you too long and I don't really hear you anymore. I don't really take your advice anymore, or I know what you're going to say before you even say it. I've been with you so long or been a friend so long. But you would do me an inestimable service by simply keeping your mouth shut and listening. It's human nature. It's how the mind works. But again, I want to get back to this path in life. We all have our path to walk. And I'll use my own example. I can tell you that the very first time I got married, I married a woman considerably older than me. She had children from a previous marriage. People thought I was nuts to be getting involved in this and marrying her. And I remember that I was on the phone with one of my sisters, and she was talking to me about it. She wasn't necessarily trying to talk me out of it at the moment, but I did say, this is just something I have to do. I don't know if it's the right thing, but it's something that I just feel like I have to do. And I did. And the marriage lasted for 2 years. It was not a fun experience, let me tell you, to be with a woman who was 10 years my senior. The age difference did not bother me at all. I was only, 25 at the time. But it bothered her a great deal, and that caused a lot of problems. And then with children involved, the children were not really the problem, but I felt like she was the problem. Of course, I'm the problem, right? Because I made a choice that was wrong, a bad choice. Well, I won't even say it was wrong, it was a bad choice. So we have to take responsibility for the choices we make. She may have been very terrible in the marriage, and she even apologized to me for being a very bad wife. From time to time, she would say that. But the fact of the matter is, I made that choice, so I have to take responsibility. It was something I had to do. I felt like I had to do, and there's all kinds of these passages in life that we have to go through. And no amount of good advice from people, and I got plenty of advice from people saying, this is not a good thing. You're stepping into a ready-made family. She's much older than you. And at 25, that's fine. What's it going to be like at 55? And so on. Rational advice, I didn't listen to it. I give rational advice. People don't listen to it. It's kind of the dance we do, though. And let's face it, to a certain extent, it's our way of being involved in others' lives, of extending ourselves. We like to be involved in other people's lives to some degree. I know there are people out there who will avoid that entirely. It's like, I've got plenty to do in my own life. I don't even want to know about anybody else's life, let alone get involved, even from a counseling standpoint. But for a lot of us, it's a way to extend our own lives into other experiences in other areas, and to enlarge ourselves in some way. But that karmic wheel just keeps turning. That karmic wheel keeps going round and round, and we all have our price to pay in life. We all have our good things and bad things. And this doesn't just count for problems. When I talk about good things and bad things, I think, what about the person who hits the jackpot? They win the lottery. Is there any shortage of people who are full of suggestions about what to do with that money? And I'm not talking about saying, hey, give some of that money to me. I'm talking about just what to do with the money that would be most fruitful for that person, just thinking about their interests and about how to make sure to conserve that money, to spend it wisely, or to have fun with it, or whatever the case may be. I've never had that problem. I don't have a friend. I don't have a friend who's won the lottery. I've never won it myself. Last thing I'd want is advice from people if I won the lottery, because that happens to be an area where let me put it this way, my wife is a wealth advisor. So I think I've got plenty of good direction on that. So somebody comes along and tries to give me advice, and the last thing in the world I want is to listen to people trying to tell me what to do with that money. That's probably how they feel when I approach them with all of my sagely advice. Over time, and I think this is probably consistent with other people, I hope it is anyway, I do less and less of that. Or at least I say, look, do whatever makes sense to you, whatever your instincts tell you. Let me tell you an experience that I had, and you can take it for what it's worth. Or let me just give you a few talking points that I've got here, and you can take them or leave them. Factor them into whatever your instincts are telling you. And you can't imagine the number of times people have told me I've given them really good advice. I think I'm good at advice giving, but the fact of the matter is, it doesn't mean people take the advice. I believe psychologists will tell you that, or life coaches or executive coaches will tell you that you need to lead the person to a place where it's their own idea. You might just ask them questions and lead them to that point, because if it isn't their idea, number one, they probably are not going to act on it. And number two, the only way it will stick is if it's their idea. It might not have been their idea. It may have been that you led them down the path. Actually, it would be their idea. You're simply laying the groundwork for them to come to that conclusion, and now it is their idea. It's so much easier for us to follow a course of action that is ours, that belongs to us. And I try to think in terms of everybody's particular incarnation and the path that they've got to walk, and that there's nothing I'm going to do to set that off or disrupt it. It is what it is. People will do what they have to do. Some of the stuff may be a requirement of their particular incarnation, the things that they've got to do. And no amount of sagely advice from me or anybody else reroutes them. What do you think about all this? Go to thespiritroom.org, scroll to the bottom, there's an email form there. Would love to hear from you about your own experiences, about whether or not you do this, whether or not you actually take advice, what your own insights are. Maybe even have a little bit of advice for me. I'm open to it. That's it for this episode. Godspeed.